Yeah,
Okay.
we will. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is Monty Soka. You're tuned into the Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting for June 12th. I'm going to take the roll and we'll get started and call the meeting to order. So, this is the order I'm going to call votes in as well. So just respond and then I'll mark you here. Karen Willie.
Here.
Sarah Waters.
Here.
Nicholas Ward.
Here.
Phil Englehart.
Here.
Mark Bueller.
Here.
Christina Gentry.
Here.
Erica Zimmerman.
Here.
Dana Ortiz.
Here.
Shannon Oury. Not here yet. Thomas Howe.
Here.
Trent Santee.
Here.
Monty Sokup. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 members. So we have a quorum. Oh, Edith Guffey. I'm sorry. I skipped right over you. Edith. And we're glad you're here, Edith. Thank you. So sorry about that. We'll be good if I don't miss someone or mispronounce somebody's name today. We'll call that a success. So, okay. So with that, the meeting's in order, and I'll have Leah read our opening statement and ground rules, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear during the meeting. When you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. A few notes on public comment. When the chair calls for public comment, individuals attending in person should approach the podium to indicate they wish to speak. The podium can be raised and lowered, and we encourage you to use this feature to ensure your comments are heard. Individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand feature to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. Individuals will be called on in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. Please state your name before speaking. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, and now I'll turn the meeting back over to Mr. Sukup.
All right, thank you, Leah. And with that, we will open the floor for public comment. I don't see anyone in the room. Is there anybody online?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, seeing no one online, we're going to close the public comment. We'll move on to item B, which is approving the minutes for May 22nd, 2023. I would accept a motion to approve so we have a motion from Thomas Howe to approve the minutes.
Second.
A second from Mark Bueller. Any comments on the minutes? Questions? See anybody online? No questions? I'm going to call the roll. Karen Willie.
Approve.
Sarah Waters.
Approve.
Nicholas Ward.
Approve.
Phil Englehart.
Approve.
Mark Bueller.
Approve.
Christina Gentry.
Yes.
Erica Zimmerman.
Approve.
Dana Ortiz.
Approve.
Edith Guffey.
Approve.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Trent Santee.
Yes.
Monty Sokup. Approved. That motion passes 12-0. With that, we will move on to our item C on the agenda, receive the presentation on housing and homelessness strategic plan and affordable housing focus area strategies. I would just encourage us to watch this presentation, take notes on strategies that might be applicable to our goals, and take some notes because in a couple meetings down the road, we're going to be working on strategies for our goals. So we'll need to be able to pull those back up. My memory's not that good. I don't know about yours, but I'm going to have to take some notes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I believe it's Gabby Sprague is going to present. I'll turn it over to Gabby.
Hello, board members. Like Mr. Sukup said, my name is Gabby Sprague. I'm the Douglas County Housing and Human Services Program Manager. Leah, before I get started, I can share my screen and provide the presentation. Trying to find you here.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, and like Mr. Sukup said, I'll be presenting today on the Lawrence Douglas County Affordable Housing and Homelessness Strategic Plan, specifically the affordable housing piece of the plan. Can you all see this okay? I just want to make sure before I continue. Okay, got a thumbs up from Dana. A little bit of background first. So the steering committee that has comprised the planning of the housing and homelessness plan was convened by KDADS in April of 2021 for a housing summit, and all of the stakeholders here were present in that meeting and continue to be a part of this space. We do need to update this here. I think there's actually quite a few more agencies involved at this point. It's a very large collective impact effort, I would say. A little bit more background. So many of you are familiar with the needs assessments that we did in our community through the Corporation of Supportive Housing in May of 2022 and the KU CPPR, Center for Public Partnerships and Research, June 2022 needs assessment. Through those, we were able to identify focus areas, those being equity and inclusion. I have some notes here. I need to look at my notes for all of those. So we have equity and inclusion, supportive housing, affordable housing, systems, and emergency shelter. And those were some focus areas that we came up, we being the steering committee, we came up through the needs assessments. And from the steering committee, we formed work groups surrounding all of those focus areas. We took 2 members from the steering committee and made groups based off of those focus areas, and those 2 facilitators then reached out to community members and other agencies that were appropriate to the work, and we've been able to come together and develop this 5-year plan with these focus areas. And like I've mentioned, I'm going to be talking primarily about the affordable housing one today. The goal of the statement of the steering committee is to develop a strategic planning framework that addresses homelessness and the need for affordable housing solutions throughout Douglas County. That's the steering committee statement. And then the overall objective of the plan is by 2028, create a system that achieves functional zero through policy, system, and environmental changes, resulting in all Douglas County residents having access to the fundamental human right of safe, accessible, attainable, and affordable housing, and which homelessness is a rare and brief occurrence. Another part of this is recognizing that we need to focus on certain disparities that we see in our community and across the nation regarding these low-income populations. I'm not going to read all of these off here, but we are thinking in each of the sort of focus area plans about these populations and making strategic goals to fit the needs of these populations here. And a big part of that is engaging and empowering individuals with lived experience in all aspects of planning and programming. The equity and inclusion focus group, which is actually meeting right now in tandem with this group, has been able to receive some grant money to ensure that we are engaging people with lived experience in the process and the planning process of this, and also as we continue to implement this program or this plan. And I would also say that the equity and inclusion work group is also working with Douglas County, who has a policy in the works to pay folks with lived experience to contribute to this work. As I keep mentioning, we have all these priority focus areas. I'm going to talk about affordable housing today. Thinking about the housing continuum, this has been present in city commission meetings, presented on, but the affordable housing piece is primarily in that affordable rental housing, affordable home ownership, and market rate housing portion of that housing continuum that you see here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about area median income limits here. So I just wanted to put this on the screen so you all could see this before I quote some numbers at you. So this is annually determined by HUD, And in the affordable housing plan, we determined that these were good income limits to use when thinking about our goals of developing affordable housing. So the overall objectives of the affordable housing focus area plan is by 2028, increase supply of affordable rental housing for households at the 30 to 60% area median income by 1,500 new units. Under the 30% range, we have 375 units. And at the 30 to 60% range, we have 1,125 new units. And of the above units, at least 1/3 will be 2 to 3 bedroom units, recognizing that we do not have enough units at that level of bedrooms. I would say that some of these objectives were pulled from the last housing study that I want to say was in 2018. Another part of the plan that we've talked about is doing an updated housing study. So one benefit of this sort of plan is that it's a living document. And I think these numbers could technically be updated by a new plan, but this is what we're working with currently. By 2028, increase supply of affordable home ownership housing for homeowners at 30 to 80% AMI by 400 units. So increase supply of affordable housing home ownership units at 30 to 60% AMI by 200, the 60 to 80% by 200. Specifically at 30 to 80% folks who are seniors and people with disabilities by 200. And of the above units, 25% will be 4 to 5 bedroom units. Again, recognizing that we don't have a lot of units that are those amount of bedrooms. As I just mentioned, we need to do a longer term plan as well. So another objective that we have is by 2028, develop a longer term housing strategic plan. And then another piece of this, in addition to the development of affordable housing, is also establishing system changes that realign power imbalances, preventing access to or development of affordable housing. And I'll talk a little bit more to that as we go through the specific strategies here. So these are the strategies here. I think this is what Mr. Sukup is talking about when talking about doing notes. As you can see here, who is responsible, Affordable Housing Advisory Board shows up a few times. So that might be one of the more pertinent ones that you all take stock of. But I'm going to go through each of these here. I'm not going to go through every single action and who is responsible and by when it will be completed and what resources are needed. But I do want to note who is responsible. It might be something that you all take stock of, and also what resources and supports are needed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how staff and volunteer time comes up quite a bit in that. So the strategy one here is provide grant subsidy for new development of units 2 to 3 bedrooms. And I would encourage you that if you have any questions about any of these, I'm going to open this up. I think a good portion of this should be some discussion and questions. So I'll open this up at the end here after we get through all of them. Strategy 2 is increase permanent affordable housing stock by identifying and acquiring parcels and units for the community land trust and future affordable housing developments. Strategy 3 is provide recommendations to Land Development Code Update Steering Committee for code updates that allow for flexible, time-efficient, and cost-effective affordable housing development. Some of this work is already being done with your staff member, Leah Roslin, and also Rebecca Buford of Tenants to Homeowners through that Code Update Steering Committee. Strategy 4, this kind of gets up to that objective that talks about system imbalances or system power imbalances. So establish tenant legal representation. Oftentimes in eviction court, landlords have legal representation 80% of the time, whereas tenants only have about 3% of the time. This is tenant legal representation is a program in many other communities that have shown to be super successful at keeping people in their homes. So this is one of those things that would be one of those system changes. Strategy 5 is establish source of income discrimination protection enforcement. Again, this first action here is ensure passing source of income discrimination protections. That has happened, although I know that the city of Lawrence is in the courts with somebody right now discussing this. I do want to say that that has been in effect since the 1st of June. So another goal here would be working with the Human Relations Commission, city staff, and city commissioners to construct programming around that ordinance. Again, this is another one of those things as far as the system imbalances. Strategy number 6 is establish a vacant structure ordinance, which would allow City of Lawrence to seize or otherwise remediate the issue if a property is left vacant and uninhabited. We have pending HB 2083. This was the bill at the State House that was going to preempt this. That did not go through. I don't think it came out of committee, although I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think it came out of committee, so we no longer have to worry about that, at least in this year. But that is another strategy. Strategy number 7 is recommend establishing an incentive program within City of Lawrence to encourage new affordable housing development. This could include waiving building and development review fees, providing property tax abatements for the creation of permanently affordable units, and expedited permitting. There's quite a few other communities that have incentive programs like this that we can look to, which is why the first action step is research. Strategy number 8 is create plan strategy for researching and acquiring funding sources, one-time and sustainable. We have Melissa Nolte of Kansas Legal Services, who is a grant writer for Kansas Legal Services, had a particular interest in heading this team that would research grant opportunities and see what our community can apply for. Strategy number 9 is develop plan for ongoing community engagement to support affordable housing efforts. I think what we found through the community listening sessions for this plan that many of you attended is that these were really important and a good action step to take in engaging our community and making sure that everyone is aware of what's happening and why all of this is happening. So we want to continue that. And continue to engage our community about this plan as it gets implemented. So that's why this strategy is a strategy. Strategy number 10, and this is the longer term plan, develop 10-year community housing plan. Create and recommend schedule for ongoing housing assessments. Again, that's that piece that we haven't had a housing study in a minute, and it would be good to do that again. And then I want to talk about why there's 5 strategies in one slide here. So a big discussion that we've had, particularly amongst Leah and I, but also with the group as well, and we're going to continue having this in this next meeting here, is capacity. This is a really good plan, in my personal opinion. But there's a difference between having the perfect plan and being able to implement it. So we have these strategies in here as things that we think should also get added to the plan and should also be done in our community. However, it's to be determined what exactly these action steps are, recognizing that many of those action steps that you saw in the last 10 strategies required staff and volunteer time. And there's only so many folks doing this work. So I think part of our community's role is stepping up and seeing where everyone can fit into all of these things. All of that being said, we don't have any action steps for these 5 strategies here, and we'll be discussing this at the next monthly meeting as to what we're thinking about regarding these strategies. So I'll go through them here. 11 is create permanent and sustainable diversified funding sources for the trust fund. 12 is develop targeted programs that increase racial equity and affordable housing access and home and land ownership for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color experiencing housing disparities. I will say that one will be kind of implemented across the board with all of the strategies, even if it's not a specific strategy even in of its own. Again, going back to those priority populations that I noted at the beginning of the presentation. 13 is create increased opportunities for community ownership of land and property for low-income community members. 14 is develop incentives to prioritize affordable housing as a community benefit for new City of Lawrence annexation approvals. And 15 is increase community capacity for permanent affordable housing development by identifying and supporting an additional community housing development organization and community land trust. But that's pretty much all of the strategies. And I think it would be appropriate to open it up for questions and discussion. Again, Leah, Rosalind, and I both facilitate this space, so I want to open it up for questions and discussion, and maybe both of us can answer them. Don't know everything about this topic, so if anyone has any questions or discussions, that would be great.
Go ahead.
Phil Engelhardt. I didn't get all the way through this, and I appreciate the fact that you noted some of the strategies that I didn't get through. I have one fundamental question to start with. It goes back to the first slide in your presentation, and the question that I'm trying to clarify in my own mind is, can we arrive at some consensus figure of the number of units that AHAB, in the form of the sales tax increment, has contributed to through the 2023 funding cycle? Can we get a number that a benchmark number, so that when I hear other people in the community throwing numbers around about this and that and the other, can we arrive at a consensus number of the number of units that AHAB has contributed to through the 2023 cycle?
Sorry, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representative. I expect that would not be particularly difficult, because we have the records of how many projects we've funded. We know the completion rate. We know what the bedrooms which the proposal had, and I think that's probably what our discussion has been around. How many bedrooms are we providing? So that would be a baseline, and I think that should be it should be attainable, should be accessible to us, I would think.
This is
It is there.
Okay. I mean, I like to see units and bedrooms, because when I talk to people in the community, they talk, I hear some pretty wildly different numbers, or at least in my interpretation of numbers, they seem wildly different. So if we could just come to a consensus on units and bedrooms, from my perspective, that would be beneficial.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. We have reported on the number of units that the trust fund has funded. I can read those off. There may be some disparity in the numbers that you hear, because the city has funded the development of affordable housing projects not through the trust fund. So if you hear other numbers of how much has been supported, that could be the disparity. So the total number of units funded with city funding and support since the trust fund was established is 643 units. Total units funded with affordable housing trust funds is 566. I don't have the bed down, 566, yeah. Total permanent affordable housing supported with trust fund is 160. Total supported through trust fund with 30-year expiration of affordability is 483. Total completed permanently affordable is 38. So we have that data. I don't have the number of bedrooms in front of me, but we have reported that, and if members are interested in seeing that a different way, I'm happy to provide that.
That sounds good. I mean, if I could get that email summary of that, that'd be great from my perspective.
Sure, and just to remind the board members and any public who might be watching that we have a dashboard that has that data online as well. So I'll be sure to send the link out as well.
This is Christina Gentry. Gabby, thank you for the great presentation. I wanted to hone in on capacity because as we're talking and looking at the slides that you have presented us, it looks like Affordable Housing Advisory Board is listed as some of the ownership and some of that work. I feel like that's a great opportunity for us as the board to dive in to what that looks like and to divide up that workload in any way that we can. I think we are also looking at our own strategies and goals. But Gabby, what do you see and what do you envision and imagine as what capacity could look like from the members here and HRC as we're talking about diving into strategies number 12 through 17 specifically, but also all the strategies? And then how could you see that membership being somehow as a representation in that space? What would you see as being optimal success for those strategies to get completed or moved forward with the AHAB's and HRC's contributions?
I think a part of this plan is, so we haven't really discussed in the monthly meetings who's going to be sort of frontlining this. Like, we have these strategies, and so 1 to 3, this person is responsible. And I think it will be through having that and doing that exercise that we determine who's going to be reaching out to who. I don't know if I feel confident in assessing all of those various parties' capacity myself. And I think it would be through conversation with those parties that we would determine that. And I think a good, if we're able to pinpoint exactly, like I said, this is a really great plan, but can we implement it? If we can pinpoint why we can't implement it, I think that will be another good a good move forward for our community in recognizing, where we might need some additional staff or volunteer hours towards these endeavors. But I think strategy 1, like provide grant subsidy for new development of units 2 to 3 bedrooms. AHAB is already doing that. Some of these things are already being done already. So we just have to make clear, like, what's already being done and where you all can fit in your roles as board members into these strategies. I'm not sure if that wholly answers your question, because I am not sure to a degree.
Right, thank you.
Sure. Have to ask me. Let's go.
Another question that I had going through as much of it as I got through was, have any notions been advanced beyond, very far advanced, in terms of additional funding sources that we might be looking at? Additional funding sources that we might be looking at. Grant subsidies, I think, is the term that you used. I mean, have we got any picture of potential avenues there, or are we still just in the fuzzy grant subsidy stage? So if that question didn't make any sense, disregard it.
No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, AHAB as a grant provider provides subsidies, but looking for more, I think, will be part of the grant team that we'll be developing through strategy number, I think it's 8. So strategy number 8 is create plan strategy for researching and acquiring funding resources. And I have some in the back of my brain, but I think it will take that team bringing it all together and approaching the appropriate parties to apply for that grant funding. I also think, which one is it here? Recommend establishing an incentive program within City of Lawrence. Along with that would go, if there were any other sort of mechanisms by which we could get more money to the trust fund. I know that's in here somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but getting more money over to the trust fund through other city allocations would be somewhere to look at as well.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator, and just to tack on to that is a reminder that this is still technically a draft plan. So the implementation of the strategies haven't really started in earnest. Some of these things, as Gabby discussed, are already happening. Like the AHAB is already providing grant subsidy for new development, for example. But the process, we took I don't know how long, 6 months to develop the draft. Then we presented the initial draft to both the city and county commissions and started doing a number of public engagement sessions and getting feedback. Our plan initially was to present a final draft for approval to the commissions in June and July, but we are taking a little bit longer to incorporate the feedback that we received from the community and take another look at our strategies, our action plan, make sure that we have the capacity to implement according to the timeline and the action steps. And then we'll go back for approval to the commissions this fall or winter. All of that is to say that, I guess we haven't really started the implementation at this point. We're still looking at finalizing the plan, and now is a really good time if you all have recommendations for how we might improve the affordable housing component, or how the AHAB could have more of a role in this plan. Now is a great time for that as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark Bueller. I have a question about strategy 6. Makes a reference to seizing property. Why is that different than condemnation? Can anybody help me with that? We have condemnation authority. Jeff, anybody?
As we have, I'm sorry, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representatives, as we at the State Association of Realtors have looked at these kind of issues, the challenge that we have is, if you are a homeowner who chooses not to live in the house or rent the house out, but you're taking care of it, this does not give you the, this ordinance would say, too bad, we're going to deal with it for you, even if you're taking care of it. And so it gives us a pretty substantial amount of heartburn. I can understand if you have a distressed property, or if you have a property which has been ignored and let be run down. That's a different element, and that's where what you're talking about, Mark, might come into play.
Okay.
I do not understand why an ordinance is necessary for taking properties which just aren't inhabited. Because you might choose to own a property and use it for something different. It's not inhabited. And now, because of this type of an ordinance, city can come in and say, well, now we're going to be responsible for it.
This is
My eyesight's not that well. I was trying to read from across the room here. What number is that one?
Strategy 6, I wrote it down real quick.
the vacant structure
Vacant
ordinance.
structure ordinance.
I did look briefly at Wyandotte counties, and they just have, what I saw so far was just a registry, and you were expected to register for free the properties that were not being inhabited at that time. I don't know what happens with it beyond that. That's as far as I got in my research.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that's a first step, is, if people are registering those properties and we have a way to understand why people aren't living in homes, is it a matter of not having the funding to keep it up, or some other reason? I don't know that I'm for or against that. I don't know enough about it. I just was looking to see what other communities are doing.
Condemnation has a very specific state statute about when you can invoke it and how you can go about it, and there's some very narrow parameters, correct, on those kind of things. For vacant structure ordinances, there's typically a little bit of a wider ask on that one. Like, you reprogram or ask the county to reprogram how taxes in arrears are applied, and so how it goes to sales on those things. And it also talks about, is there a way that some municipalities and some states also go so far as to say is, look, if you're willing to sell it to us, we will take care of the taxes on those kind of things. That way, it's a way of getting through the housing and getting to a structure and helping the individual out of a situation they may not want to be in. If it's a lot of structural repair that they don't want to deal with, or it just you may have inherited it and you don't want it. So there's a lot of different ways that it goes about it. But for condemnation, there are very narrow standards in state statute in which it can be applied.
Okay, thank you all for kind of clarifying it. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be excited about that myself. And actually, we can do all those things today. Private citizen could call them. Actually, the city or county could call them. And having been on the county commission, I remember the infrequent property sales we had, tax sales, which are onerous and problematic and all that, but it is something you can do. So, okay, thanks for the clarification.
I'll make one comment there, personal experience. My wife worked on vacant structures and vacant structural ordinances in Wyandotte County a fair percentage of time for about 5 years, and they made very little actual headway beyond the registry, partially for the reasons that Thomas noted. But there are things, for example, the property sale thing, that they moved fairly aggressively on and helped to turn, and Wyandotte County and Douglas County are two different beasts, but they were able to make some inroads. But in terms of the wider problem, you know, there are still a lot of issues. That's a difficult nut there.
Thank you.
And I will grant the Wyandotte County, in terms of abandoned properties and properties which are in disrepair, it's a much wider problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. And just to add some more, I guess, nuance to that, different communities have the ordinance written in different ways. And as we're thinking about this, we're certainly not thinking of a way to penalize or seize property of homeowners that are paying their taxes, that are maintaining the property. And we are certainly not interested in penalizing low-income homeowners who don't have the means to maintain the housing up to code. And so if we do look at such an ordinance, we'd want to make sure that in tandem with it, we have some sort of fund that we're helping low-income property owners to be able to maintain and stay and maintain their property if that's what they desire. Some don't. Some feel so underwater that they'd like to get out of it, a way to get out of it, and perhaps just some sort of fee for homeowners or property owners that are leaving the property uninhabited. Other communities use those fees to feed into their affordable housing trust fund, knowing that we need a valuable housing stock and that if there's housing sitting vacant, not being utilized, that's helping the community in some way. All of those are details, though, that would need to be figured out in the writing of the ordinance through many, many community engagement sessions, through discussions with our commission, in a way that makes sense for the Lawrence market, looking at it from an equity stance, so that, again, it's not disproportionately penalizing people that we are trying to ultimately help.
Mm-hmm. This is Monty Sokup, Justice Matters representative, I guess. I like the plan. I think it's a good plan overall. I have real concern about how we get it implemented and the personnel and manpower and, you know, along with restructuring the committees and all that stuff that's going on right now of how this actually gets done. So that said, I guess, you know, that's my biggest concern with the plan is how it happens, because there's a lot of great ideas there and a lot of good work that's gone into this, but still have to do the work. So. All right. Any other comments? And if not, we'll move on. I see anybody online. Okay. Thank you, Gabby. Appreciate your coming today and presenting that. So good work on that.
Thank you, board members.
All right. So we will move on to the next item, which is review and consider approval of the NOFO materials for the 2024 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Awards. So I'd like to do this all at once, if we can, approve all 5 documents. And if people have comments or have something they want to discuss, I think we just bring that up. If you reviewed it and you have minor edits that you could just give to Leah, you know, if you want to change a comma is to an R or a something like that, I suggest you just give those to Leah, and we don't spend a lot of committee time. If you have a substantive change, yes, there you go.
That word.
Let's certainly have a discussion about it.
Mr. Chair, I would
Yeah.
actually make a motion to adopt all of these, approve and adopt all of these 5 documents, since we've spent the last 2 meetings pretty extensively on it, and we have to approve them at this meeting. So knowing that, I would like to ask that we as a committee commit to simplifying all of these documents for the next round. As someone who writes grants, I find these to be a pretty heavy lift. So I think that's something we can look at. We can't do that for this meeting, and I think what we've been able to put together asks the questions that we need answered. So I would make a motion unless you're not ready.
And I would second that motion with the proviso that we do work on the simplification.
All right.
Yeah.
I move to approve the 2024 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Notice of Funding Opportunity, Application, Matrix, and Key Project Elementals Chart.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Anybody have anything they want to?
Yeah, just a comment. I agree with everything that's been said recently. I would like to figure out a way that we could, and maybe we can, but we don't really know, figure out if we grant this money today, when is the likelihood that we'll have units in the air and people living in warm houses? And I know that has to do with lots of things.
Yeah.
We're
But-
not granting any dollars through this. We're just
We're not-
putting out
yeah.
the notice of funding.
No, I know.
Right,
But
so-
when it gets to the criteria that of all the rules, one of the things I'd like to talk about in those ton of things that are on the application is,
How fast do they hit the
When-
road?
when can this go?
And I think perhaps.
Because time is money.
I think perhaps Nick is in this room at any rate, in the best position to answer that. From the time that tenants to homeowners is granted funds to the time when you turn over the keys to its new inhabitant, how long is that? And I know that there is a
Yeah.
range, I recognize that.
So Nicholas Ward with Tenants to Homeowners. So that, like you said, that's a big range and it varies. I would say typically just the component of us constructing a house from beginning of pulling permits to the house being completed and sold to an owner is usually between 7 and 10 months. And lately there's been more than have come up before, other not conflicts, but like roadblocks in that process, like things that you don't necessarily know of ahead of time. And we're working with the city to be able to identify some of these things more readily and earlier on in the process. But right now, for instance, I'm working with the neighborhood to release a restrictive covenant. And that can take anywhere from 1 day to a year to do something like that. And then that would have to happen before you get into all the engineering and all the other stuff that's going to follow that. So in a perfect case scenario, and the funding is available and everything's ready to go, I would say it could be 7 months. In a not ideal scenario, in a smaller project, you might be looking at 2 years before, from acquisition to folks moving in. If it's land that you're purchasing. That's different than if you're buying an existing house and doing minimal rehab.
Right,
Yeah.
and presumably, even when you're buying land, hopefully there's infrastructure in place already, and so you don't have to run water lines and,
Right.
all the utility sewer and all those things.
Well,
I didn't mean to hijack the motion.
no.
I did. I
But,
didn't mean to.
but so it's a range, and I understand that there's often community frustration with that. The other thing that happens is if we're trying to do something that is newer, so if we're increasing density in a piece of land, where we're increasing density, well, you might have a sewer line and water line and some of these other things already running through the existing unit. But if you're putting 4 more units on there, all of that has to be increased, and there's additional time that's taken with implementing greater density in a space too. So those are considerations as well. But I know, just like everybody else, we would like to get those units built as soon as possible. So our waiting lists right now are larger for both rental and ownership than they have been in the past.
All right. Thanks. I think Trent wanted to.
Yeah, it's real quick. Trent Santine, Lawrence Home Builders Rep. Mark, on our last round of applicants, we discussed it like during the application process, and it was a little, maybe you could ask for it to be a larger part of the scoring matrix, but we did discuss feasibility and timelines with all the applicants, and some of the applicants actually, that was a big part of the reason why they lost out on funding, was because the timeline of their other funding, they didn't hit. And so when they missed that mark, we asked them to, hey, come back when you have your other money ready.
This is Monty Soko Chair. And actually, last time we had a project that was under construction, and they delivered units within months of funding because they were already under construction and needed additional funding. So it's the gambit. So good question for interviews, certainly.
Yes.
All right, any other discussion? I don't want to cut anybody off. All right, seeing none, I'm going to call the roll. And I see that Shannon joined us as well. I think, yes. So, okay. Karen Willie.
Aye.
Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Nicholas Ward.
Abstain?
Phil Engelhardt.
Yes.
Mark Bueller.
Aye.
Christina Gentry.
Aye.
Erica Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dana Ortiz.
Yes.
Shannon Ahory.
I abstain.
Edith Guffey.
Yes.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Trent Santee.
Yes.
Monty Sokup, yes. Motion passes 11 for 2 abstentions. All right, good work, people.
Yes.
It was a lot of work the last couple of months, but I think we're in a good place, and I agree. We get it simplified a little bit, streamlined a little bit next round. So, okay. Review and consider providing feedback. Oh, no. Schedule a special Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting for October 2023 to discuss and provide recommendations for the 2024 Affordable Housing Trust Fund grants. I believe that
Oh, shoot.
we have the NOFO. Wait a minute, we got 2 things here. It looks like schedule the meeting for October 23. Oh, we just got to, okay. So I think Leah sent out a doodle poll and picked out maybe some dates that work for everybody.
Is it okay? This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. The most popular time was Monday, October 16th from noon to 1:30.
From when to when?
So actually,
Well, 1:30.
it looks like there are two times now that I look closer that 9 members are available. So either Monday, October 16th from noon to 1:30, or Tuesday, October 17th from 1 to 2:30.
Mr. Chair, this is Sarah Waters at KU. I did not get that filled out by the deadline. I apologize. I could not make a Tuesday meeting at all. So I will likely be able to make the Monday. So if that was also 9 members, I would prefer that, and I will do my best. I'm hosting an all-day conference those 3 days, so I will, for Big 12 schools. So, but yeah, please Monday, and I will do my best to be there. Tuesday, I absolutely could not be.
Okay, any objections to the 16th? Any?
And is that 12 to 1:30? Is that?
Okay, Monday, October 16th, 12 to 1:30, I would accept them. Do we need a motion for that, or can we just set the date?
I accept your chairmanship. We're on.
Okay, so I don't think we need a motion to establish that date. So October 16th, and would you say the time was noon to?
Noon.
Noon.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Going once, twice? Okay, here we go. Item 4, review and consider providing feedback on the proposed city board and commission realignment. So I would open that up to anybody that wants to comment on that.
Are they giving us
I'll comment on it.
one extra job or two? I'm a little confused on
No, yeah. So I think the proposal basically is to put some of the responsibilities with the, Human Resources Commission, and then to put the award of the funding responsibilities with a different group, which awards funds for other income sources. So, personally, as I looked at that, I think that's problematic in the fact that you separate the knowledge from the knowledge of the issues from the decision on the awards of funds. Because if the group that's doing the awarding doesn't have any knowledge of the issues and what the important issues are and the impact of these things, I don't know how they can make a good decision funding. That's my inherent difficulty with what's been proposed.
Perhaps, this is Christina Gentry, perhaps Monty and then maybe Leah could go into detail, because as I read it, it was the fiscal responsibility or the stewardship that would be granted another board that is to be named. I can't really pull that up to see, but that they would be the fiscal responsibility, as in taking ownership of those grant funding being positioned where they were supposed to be as a decision of the board. So maybe there's more questions that could be answered there, but as I read it, it was just like an allotment that would be as the charge as that new commission, as that combined commission, not so much as deciding or a board governing where those monies go. So maybe that in reading that I was misunderstood. I thought that the board and commission realignment looked to be strong because we're talking about capacity as well. And I know the Human Relations Commission does a lot of the work that we also do. So there's some overlay and there's some intersections there that makes sense to me. But maybe more, as I read it, I didn't see that board would be tasked with allotments of what the funding would be for AHAB's recommendations.
So where do you see this NOFO process that's like our one big function of every year of awarding those funds? Where does that land? What group does that function?
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. That under the proposed structure, that would fall under the new board that would be responsible for allocating the special alcohol funds, the trust funds, and the sales tax audit funds, is what it reads to me and other folks on staff that I've checked with.
Yeah, we're on 3 boards now, right?
So
Well,
this is
dissolve our board. They'll dissolve this. The way I read it.
Let's say
this
we
is
all make the
dissolved.
This
cut.
would be dissolved,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have 3 boards.
Two,
Two.
sound
way I-
fiscal stewardship and equity and inclusion. Those are the 2 boards that AHAB gets merged into.
Yep. Could I make some comments?
Yeah.
I had put together a rough, there is a meeting on Thursday.
Right.
First listening session at the Carnegie Building on Thursday, and I had put together a very rough letter that I think expresses my thoughts. Very rough, very wordy, but the way I see it, that draft proposal takes away the expertise that the statute that developed AHAB at the beginning purposely embedded the expertise of tenants to homeowners and habitat and family promise and so forth and so on, and then they tried to balance it with people from Douglas County and city people at large and the board of realtors, so they tried to do a democratic balance thing. There are inherently some potential conflicts of interest when you have, people applying for funds. Everybody gets that. But that structure seems like it's works reasonably well. I mean, I know there have been some issues in the past, but it seems like it works reasonably well. So my questions are basically, what are the motivations for these proposed changes? You know, is the governing body and the city commission unsatisfied with the way that AHAB is functioning? You know, what are the perceived weaknesses? Can we see some specific examples? You know, what is the rationale for doing this? I think those are fair questions, and I think something that this restructuring board really hadn't thought about, and I'm speaking from my own personal perspective here, is that one of the reasons why I was attracted to this board, outside of my deep passion for affordable housing, was that it actually wielded in a power structure form, you know, some actual input. If you separate the fiscal component from the ethical component, you're devolving, you know, willing participants down the power ladder to where you're just another person who is making, you know, I forget what Shelley Arnstein's term was, but you are reducing your civic participation level down, potentially. And I just wonder if they thought about that as they went through this restructuring. I would propose as an alternative, okay, very roughly, okay, that they leave AHAB alone, that the proposed structure, rather than putting it in one of the boxes, the strategic plan outcome areas, that they move it to safe and welcoming neighborhoods. You know, I quote, provide opportunities to lead healthy lifestyles with access to safe and affordable housing and essential services that help them thrive. That's exactly what AHAB is, that is exactly the mission of AHAB. Why doesn't it go into the outcome area of safe and welcoming neighborhoods? I'll shut up.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator, and I am going to ask Jeff to help clarify and expand this a little bit. But my understanding is the intent of the committee looking at this was to get just one board under each strategic plan commitment area. Is that correct?
I'm not the expert on that committee. It's one of the few I don't serve on, but I believe that to be the intent was to try to find ways to combine those expertise and those resources so you didn't have a lot of overlap and didn't have a lot of kind of missing opportunities. And yeah, I think Christina made a very good point about there's human relations and you have a lot of overlap. And so just kind of find ways to make that work is the intent and the hope. And this is just also the recommendation. This is not the final thing. They're just trying to get the first, you know, throwing it out there. Let's see how everybody thinks about it, retool that, and come back to it probably is how I was looking at it. So this is just a first take on it, not exactly the end product is my understanding.
Isn't the perception there are too many boards?
I believe that's the perception that the commission
feeding
started
information to the city commission.
I believe that to be the case, yes.
Okay.
This Nicholas Ward. I mean, one of the things I thought about in looking at this is that already within AHAB, we find ourselves constructing subcommittees essentially to deal with some of the topics that we have, because there's already so much for us to consider that we need to go levels more just with the body that we have to tackle just the work we have. And I think mashing up groups that 100% need to have full focus on what they're focused on, including affordable housing, including equity and inclusion, that just sprinkling in like pieces of knowledge. I agree. Like, I think this board could even be more robust. So you're not just getting kind of one representation from a few different groups of concerns. Would be great. So there's more impact for some of the conversations that need to happen. But I don't think that there needs to be less of a knowledge base and less focus, especially if affordable housing is becoming a community priority, that we have more work than we can do already, and to eliminate our focus or the amount of time we can spend focusing just on affordable housing I don't think would be a service to that initiative.
So perhaps, I know that there was a survey, this is Christina Gentry, perhaps there was a survey that went out district-wide. I mean, everyone, not even associated with the board, all community members, all residents, all folks were able to sound in on the survey that went out beforehand, and then there's a collection of our responses here today. Maybe there's some clarification of what that work would entail. Because as I'm reading, as Affordable Housing Advisory Trust Fund, under sound fiscal stewardship, they would be responsible in this space, in this idealistic space, responsibility for distribution of funds under sound fiscal stewardship. So does that mean that we as a board, or the Affordable Housing Advisory Board and Human Relations Commission would continue on with our NOFOs as we have done work, and then another board would be responsible for making sure that money was allocated correctly? Or, there's more questions that I have on that too. So as I'm reading it, it says the responsibility would be for the distribution of funds, not to create the matrix or the rubric or all the things that we are doing. So I'm just kind of confused on how those works would be allocated and who'd be responsible for each.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. I think when they put responsibility for distribution of funds, they were just simplifying the process. The under distribution entails coming up with the goals, the targets, the NOFO, the application. So essentially, there would be all of the boards and committees as we know it would be disbanded, and new ones would be created with new members and new charges. And so a brand new board under sound fiscal stewardship would then be responsible for the distribution of the funds, including prioritization, the NOFO, the application process, et cetera, for the trust fund, special alcohol funds, and the sales tax audit committee work, which...
Thank you for that clarification.
So assuming we were all appointed to this new committee, we would have 3 committees worth of work. Is that the idea?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I read it, it would be the responsibility of simply the trust fund component plus the overseeing of the other community grant funds. So that the policy work of the AHAB would then go into the new equity and inclusion board, merged with the Human Relations Commission. And then the grant making work of the AHAB would then go to another board. So essentially the policy work, the understanding of affordable housing issues, community need, would likely be discussed under the new board under equity and inclusion. So then how is the grant making board then becoming informed regarding the need, community strategy, et cetera, for supporting the strategies through funding?
Okay. I am completely confused. So I'm slow. But if this is perfect, this really, once we figure it out, this is a great way to do it. And so there's going to be a sound fiscal stewardship board.
Correct.
Okay. And let's say everybody on this committee is on it. Okay? So, welcome to the first meeting. Will our job include all we have been doing, or will it be a piece of the duty that we have been doing?
It'll be a piece of the duty. It'll be the grant making, the trust fund allocation process.
So we just pick the winners and losers in October, whatever that time frame is, and then how do we know the rest of the stuff? Who?
Correct, right. So I think that's the concern that's been expressed, is that the adaptive work of affordable housing, which it takes adaptive leadership. There are complicated and complex
I still don't know
issues.
what I'm doing.
Right, and it takes a long time to learn. Community needs strategies, all this. So the adaptive work of affordable housing work is being separated from what is being seen, in my view, as the technical work of grant making. The grant making is just a process of allocating funds based on an application received that can be done sort of void of the adaptive community work.
Okay, so we just make the award, and in addition to that, we also make an award for, well, what do we do with sales tax audit committee? What?
And
if you're on that board, you'd be awarding those funds as well.
That's what I mean. We're going to award
Yeah.
these funds
You're going to
too.
do multiple processes for awarding.
That particular one also, I don't sit on that one, surprisingly enough, really just reviews and audits things. They don't actually make awards and grants. They just review to make sure that the funds are being expended in terms and agreements that are in place for however those funds are collected.
So that'll be a board of 3 accountants. I mean, in my world, it would, okay? Which I'm not and don't want to be.
Right.
oh,
The Special Alcohol Fund, now we're going to do that too. Right.
And that one is pretty well allocated on its own accord. So there's not a lot of, there's not a process particularly with that one. And a lot of these boards also they don't meet at monthly intervals. They'll meet quarterly.
I
They'll meet.
understand.
So there's a lot of different frequency in there. But again, not on either of those, so can't really go into.
So it'd be pieces and parts of 2 committees and part of the committee that I now sit on.
Something like
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm going to, Trent's been waiting. Let's give Trent a chance to jump in here. And then Eric.
Hi, Trent. Very good. Trent Santee, Lawrence Homelessness Rep. I was just letting that kind of play out organically because I was kind of on the same page of trying to understand. So it sounds like we're splitting AHAB. Excuse me. We'd be splitting AHAB. The trust fund allocation would be the steward fiscal part. And then let's just say the rest of the work would be the equity and inclusion part. Is there any guidance or expectation on how they split the board? Like what members go where? Is the idea that, I mean, is there any indication of that, or who goes to do which side, or do they have to reapply, or like, is that all to be determined?
Yeah. From my understanding, it's a dissolving of basically all the minor boards, and then would be a reapplication and repopulating the new boards. Maybe with the exception of human resources, I don't know, because it's an existing ongoing board, but I don't think it's a splitting of our board. I don't think if you have a seat on this board, you're not guaranteed a seat anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's the way I understand it.
I would understand.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay, Erica, go ahead.
Erica Zimmerman, Lawrence Habitat. I would just offer just a little bit different view. I was kind of intrigued when I saw this split out. I hear the adaptive and technical challenges, and I understand that, but I feel like we focus a lot of our time on the NOFO and the application, and maybe that'll change now that we have gone through all this work. But I was kind of excited to see the split out so that there could be a group that focused solely on housing policy and housing ideas and creation ideas, and just some other work that we haven't got to in all of my time at Habitat. So I think this provides an opportunity to maybe delve a little bit deeper into some of those things that we thought we were going to be doing at AHAB, but because of a lot of different reasons, we haven't quite been able to get there yet. So I was kind of intrigued and a little bit excited about the changes.
Thank you, Erica. Anyone else?
This Nicholas Ward. I want to hear from. I guess I would want to hear from someone on the Human Relations Commission too, and see if what their workload looks like, and if bringing in the conversation of affordable housing and all the things that we need to talk about in that, if that impedes the amount of work they're doing, or if it gels really well and could kind of be seamless, because there are lots of overlaps, but then there are some kind of like policy-based considerations, and like what we're doing right now, dealing with the new zoning code that would a little bit be of interest, and in some cases wouldn't be of interest maybe for that group, but they need full attention and a knowledge base to help steward those. So that's one of the things that enters my head.
I'd say other than the Planning Commission, AHAB is probably the one that really needs enough technical background of its members in order to do good work. I think that's maybe more so than other commissions. I'm not familiar with all of the boards for the city, so that's just one comment. And the other is, I don't know what the Human Relations Commission does. Can we ask for a little bit of a lowdown?
No, I mean, I watched some of the meetings, and I'm intrigued by the real engagement with community, because it's, they're really dealing with civilian work. They're taking in any complaints and looking those over and making strategies to address them. That's really the extent of my knowledge, only because their eyes on me as though I knew what the Human Relations Commission.
I didn't know exactly how.
No, I mean, I'm involved with the chair, as it was a source of income was being pushed, and we talked about those conversations. But as a workload exists, I'm not really sure. I would encourage everyone to maybe watch some videos that come on YouTube, just like ours does, because I am also part of the public incentives review committee, and our commission, our committee is waning in its attendees, and so we oftentimes don't have enough to make a vote because we are under commission or under committed, and so I think that adding more to that body of work would be great. But yeah, I think my question would be like, when would this come into place? These conversations that we're having right now, does that make there be an objective change? Are we still in the process, or is this something that is, we talk about it, but it's going to continue to roll on regardless? So that would be my question too.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. A couple of things. First, regarding the charge of the Human Relations Commission. The Commission works to eliminate discrimination in employment, public accommodations, and housing by accepting, investigating, ruling upon, and resolving complaints within the city limits of Lawrence. So historically, that Commission has just, if there are concerns regarding discrimination based on protected classes in housing, employment, or public accommodations, they're the group that hears those complaints and makes rulings on them. And then they did lead up the source of income non-discrimination ordinance policy. So I think that was a little bit of a, they stepped into policy work in that regard. In terms of Christina's question regarding is this already happening? What can we do at this point? Or, and I'm sorry, I see your hands up, but I just wanted to note to the board that there are a couple of additional community engagement opportunities that folks might be interested in attending. So June 15th and June 16th, there's both an in-person and online version. I have requested that either the staff liaison or somebody from that committee attend the AHAB because the AHAB recommendation is different than all of the other recommendations, and that it would be split in two. And the response was to decline that invitation and encourage members to attend the public sessions. And so at this point, the City Commission has not made a formal decision. They haven't approved the recommendation, so there are still opportunities to hear feedback, and potentially that group would make changes. And so I would suggest that the AHAB could, just as individual members, attend those public engagement sessions to give your feedback, or the AHAB, if you all wish, could make a joint statement as a board to send to the committee or the commission, if there's consensus.
Okay, I think we got Edith. Thank you, Leah. I think we got Edith waiting here on.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned about the either or, that we're either financial or policy, because I don't think they can be totally split. They're always interwoven, because policy always impacts finances, and splitting them as if they are two separate pieces, I think really does send a message that I'm certainly not willing to send, or even imply. Now, we may have leaned too heavily on one as opposed to another, and I think Erica has a point there, but splitting them does send a different kind of message.
So, question would, I guess we could, as a board, potentially make a statement. I don't know exactly where that goes, but if we could choose to. I'm not saying we have to. I'm just saying we could choose to.
And Monty Soko, could we make a recommendation letter as a board? I mean, that would
Right.
require us getting back together and being more special meetings, but I think it's important because of all of the things I've heard here and the questions, I think it's relevant to kind of say what it is we've been saying in this space right now, and for the commission to know that these are concerns that we have, for what it's worth.
I agree with that, and I think we need to propose an alternative. It's fine to say that as a board, we think these are the weaknesses in this proposed restructuring, but we need to provide an alternative. And my feeling is that the work that AHAB does, and I call it affordable housing and ethics is how I look at it. But the work that's done, I think it fits very neatly into safe and welcoming neighborhoods, rather than being split into the other two outcome areas that are strong welcoming neighborhoods. In fact, like I said, there are words in that mission statement that you can read them there. There are words there that say exactly what we're trying to accomplish here, I think.
And Phil, would your recommendation include that whatever the future AHAB board would also be the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Board of Building and Code Appeals, and the Historic Resources Commission? Because I think the idea is to have one under each of these headings.
Since I don't know I only know in a very general sense what those three boards do, I couldn't, I haven't thought that far ahead. So
I can't imagine you get, Board of Zoning Appeals and all planning. I mean, you look at the Planning Commission meetings, they run till midnight. It's like, how are you going to add this to that? I don't know.
Planning isn't on that list.
Planning's not on there, okay. But, you look at some of those, the work, we always run out of time at 2 hours, seems like.
I ask Jeff one question here. How often do those three boards meet? The Board of Zoning Appeals, Sign Code Board, how often do they meet?
Board of Zoning Appeals and Sign Code Board are the same board, so depending upon the agendas, they will typically meet monthly. So there may not be a Sign Code Board every month, but there's typically a Board of Zoning Appeals every month. Historic Resource Commission also meets monthly, and the Building Code Board of Appeals is almost as an ad hoc. It has to meet once a year, but only meets if there's a business to be had.
Okay.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Nicholas Ward, I'm just thinking about this, and that the splitting of these roles within what is currently the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, I think we're just getting to the point right now with our listening and our understanding that we realize that the applications that we're developing in this, because we have the other component that would fall not under sound fiscal stewardship but under equity and inclusion in a way, is how we need to make what we're developing as the application more accessible to, on one hand, people who are developers in the community, and make it so that the application is easier for them to approach when they're not in the world of doing this work, and some of the questions they're seeing on those applications aren't unrecognizable of how to approach that. And they have Leah, of course, to contact and reach out to have some guidance through that. But then also other groups who would want to be a part of that work of working on housing, and without the one hand of the equity and inclusion, the part where you would hear essentially what is the Human Relations Commission component of what needs to change or be shifted or improved or evolved about that, and then the other part which would fall under fiscal stewardship, which would shape and then award based on those things. Without those two hands talking to each other, I think we wouldn't be getting better at that process. Yeah, and so I'll just leave it there. But that was, I think we're just getting there, and it takes a while in shaping all of that. But we're getting closer to a process that's going to bring more players to the table when it's about who's developing housing, and especially as we bring on incentive packages and things like that, which we're hoping occur, that we'll be getting more people to the table.
I think as the NOFO process gets streamlined, that will take a lot less time from this commission, and hopefully less of Leah's staff time also, so that the board can shift more to policy work and then keep those two hands together, but not be so skewed towards the NOFO.
So Leah, if we were to try to develop a letter or some comment or opinion, whatever, when would we need to have that to submit to, or Jeff, either one? I mean, could we develop something and review it at our next month's meeting? Or is that too late in the process to have any impact?
Could we empower the chair to work with Leah to draft that letter?
I think the question has to do I think the question has to do with does the subcommittee.
Hold on 1 second, please. I'm sorry, this is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. Mark, do you mind muting yourself, please?
So when would we need to?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And then just note that Trent has his hand up. So I believe that Jeff is looking for the timeline.
Okay.
Can I just jump in on this? And the very best way to affect policy is the fact that we have money to allocate.
Absolutely.
And, right, I mean, because those two things go together, we prioritize the things that we say are our highest policy concerns for people who've been disenfranchised. And so divorcing those two things, I mean, can really kind of create a conflict. Like another body's going to say what the policy is, but then, right, AHAB's going to say where the money goes. I mean, it's very disjointed, and I mean, I would really disagree with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. Trent's got his hand up there. Trent.
Trent Santee, Lawrence Home Builders Rep. I guess to me, it just comes down to, in layman's terms, are we essentially saying that the Equity and Inclusion Board would maintain the scoring matrix and set the policy of what the scoring matrix and that is, and then the other board would then take the scoring matrix and use that to listen to the presentations? Because that doesn't seem that disenfranchised to me, because I personally feel like we should have our scoring matrix and our system set up to where essentially anybody could look at it and objectively say, okay, does that meet the criteria? There's a point. And it looks like we've made great progress in getting more to that essentially setup. And I guess to me, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal that, as someone said earlier, that the accountants jokingly would be the ones to do the scoring matrix, because as long as the people who are maintaining the matrix and deciding what it is are knowledgeable, then I feel like that should speak for itself. That's a big assumption that that's how they're going to split this.
Yeah, this is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. It would be shocking if that's it. So the way that I understand it, again, is that the grant-making board would be responsible for the whole grant-making process, including developing the matrix, setting priorities, et cetera. The Equity and Inclusion Board or any other board wouldn't have the authority to put work on or delegate the priorities or goals of another board.
Okay, then I guess I'm just confused on how they're going to split, what part of the advisory board's roles are going to go into the Equity and Inclusion Board.
So I think the Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator, the policy work, the policy recommendations. So for example, if we're looking at the Housing and Homelessness Community Plan Affordable Housing Strategies that were presented earlier, so the strategy around maybe tenant legal right to counsel, or protection or enforcement of the source of income, non-discrimination, that would be in that equity and inclusion group.
Okay.
Whereas the funding, right, the granting of the subsidy would be done in the sound fiscal stewardship group.
Okay, that makes sense. But like I said, I guess just to me, it just, as long as, I don't know, I guess it's just so confusing just to have to process what exactly the splitting of the fees would be. But thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we're no. Jeff, you.
Yeah, to the board's question, I don't know if they're going to have a meeting after that, but I would anticipate they would probably have a meeting following up after their comment that they're gathering this week. And the questionnaire they have runs through the 30th of June. So there's still quite a bit of time. So I would say is if the commissioners would like you to participate in that digital questionnaire to get your thoughts and feedback up to that other board for consideration, I think that may be the most quickest and prudent way to do it. I'm not sure you'd have time to reconvene and review a letter in time for that to be considered if that June 30th is the moment they stop taking the input to start the deliberation. May not have time to meet for that one. So I would just say that digital questionnaire is online and can be filled out by anybody, so you may want to take advantage of that.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
One comment on the digital questionnaire. The way it's structured, because I thought I would put my comments in there.
I've done it.
And the way it's structured doesn't lend itself to in-depth arguments or presentation, in my opinion. So it's not a vehicle I don't think that we can make a very coherent statement through. I don't think.
So, yeah, so you can always, write your commissioners, you can write the city manager. You're welcome to send anybody in the city a letter at any time.
As long as we say,
you're representing yourself.
Right.
Yeah, that you're representing yourself. And that may be one effective way for people on this board, should you decide to take the time to do that. Because it doesn't sound like we're going to get unless this board grants someone the authority to write a letter.
Bill's passing that along to you.
Oh, this is a letter you wrote.
right.
For us to review at some point. I don't know that we're going to come up with something in time.
Yeah, I mean,
we can all agree.
I would be in favor of authorizing Monty to write a letter on our behalf, because I think us speaking clearly with a unified voice is stronger than each one of us trying to fill out some check yes or no. Do you agree? Don't, kind of box. I mean, I've looked at the survey and I agree it's not that great. And so I'd be in favor of trusting Monty to write, a letter saying we do not support this. And we think it will impede our work.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to be a part of the solution. And so I guess I need to understand the reason. I mean, we all interpret the reason why the city wants to go from 22 boards to whatever. But I want to understand that reason. Maybe we don't know it, but we're part of the problem. I mean, I get a little paranoid when they're all of a sudden, we're going to do something different. And I think, maybe it's me. So, and I'm talking about myself, I'm not talking about the rest of you. So I want to be a part of the solution. I want to hear why they want to do it and why they think our concerns can be addressed about whacking up the things we're doing to get to a decent end. So at this point, I don't want the board speaking for me because I don't know what I'm talking about yet. But if the board decides to make a statement, that's fine. I don't think we're ready for that, my opinion.
I think what we're hearing is not, here's the problem with it and here's the solution for it. I think we just want to put forward that the equity work and the dollars behind it is a powerful combination, and we would like to see that maintained. Mm-hmm. How they do it, they're weighing a lot of other things. I don't think we need to dictate, but I think that's kind of the basis of what I'm hearing. Though I know Erica had a different perspective, and I don't want to say that everybody has said the same thing.
Right.
So this is Christina Gentry. I imagine the scope of the work is done by outside consultants. gathering up all the information that if any of us contributed to the many opportunities for us to do that online, and then kind of came up with their own plan as it looks. Is that how this structure was worked through?
No, there's no outside consultants. It's being done by the city manager's office and the city clerk's office.
Okay.
Other cities don't have this many boards. That's what they're looking at.
Yes, I'd say it is a bit unique to Lawrence and how many boards that it has the first city of its size.
Guilty.
It's called civic participation.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And so with that being the city management, there'd be more opportunity for there to be opt for changes to be made and adjustments be made as according to each board's representative, or what letter of recommendation or something we get together to compile to make say that this is what we recommend, and not jumping to solutions, but moving towards what adaptive work we could do to create something that could say, this is what we see as key components to the work we're doing already, and we don't want this structure to change as you see it, but maybe give us something else to work with. Is that an option that the city commission or city management would also consider?
It would be the city commission ultimately. That's the convener of the boards and commissions review as part of that. And I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of great questions that you all have asked, but I think it's probably, at a level or two down from where that review is currently at, because they're just really at that 50,000 foot look at the moment, and they haven't quite gotten a little more granular in the review. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try to wrap this up and move us on. I'm not super comfortable writing a letter for this board. Love y'all. But we have a lot of varying, opinions and viewpoints. I'm going to, I guess, hope and suggest that the city commission watch this segment of our meeting, that we can maybe make that kind of recommendation, and that they would see our comment firsthand and hear the concern about, on either side of the argument. I'm personally going to write a letter, and send it. And I hope you guys, others of you would as well, and fill out the survey to the best you can. I filled out mine, with whatever 140 words or whatever it is that they let you use. Get get the strong points across first. That's all you can do. You're not going to make a long-winded argument. You're going to get a few points across and get the important ones out there that are important to you. So with that, I'm going to, unless there's anybody else that has any strong desire to comment, I'm going to move us on to the next item. All right, thank you everybody for the discussion there. Important issue, certainly, and one I hope we can have some impact on. Okay, last item on the regular agenda is 5, and that is to consider a letter of request for CIP funds for the Going South project. As you guys may recall, this project came up in one of our NOFO processes. A private developer trying to make application was not really successful in filling out the whole application, and really did not get awarded any funds. But it is, in my opinion, it's a pretty interesting project. So they have basically the developer, through some counseling from us, connected with tenants to homeowners and Lawrence Habitat to figure out, help them get through that process and figure out how to make an application. And because the CIP funds, since we didn't have the process developed for the CIP funds in this year, those funds basically got deferred till next year. So we don't have anything to award right now. So there are no CIP funds for us to award at this point, because that process is down the road. So there's a couple things we could do with this recommendation. We could basically tell this applicant to apply in the regular NOFO process and award trust funds and not award CIP dollars. So that was one option that would be available to them. We could forward this to, and I don't know who it would go to, Leah, or Jeff, but we could forward this to be submitted in the next CIP project process for 24. So those are two options, and it could actually do either, because you could probably get through the NOFO process and learn whether you got funded or not, and then go to the CIP maybe, or make parallel applications and see if you get funding one way or another. My gut is that's what we probably should do, is advise them of their options, because otherwise this is an out of sequence funding request for us. And in the past, we have basically told people without a sequence to come to the NOFO. We award funds. We've tried to do it that way. There was an exception to that. I'll note that. But that's generally where, we've tried to go.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a comment. When this developer brought us their project without having the expertise, without having the knowledge of the process, I think we all felt very pleased that we were having a private developer come and make a presentation to us, even if it was not. And we encouraged them to continue to learn more about the process, because we felt like it was it was a good intent, that it was put forth in good faith, and that it was a project which had merit. We couldn't do it strategically at that point. And I think we need to continue to encourage the developer to work forward with this. And I think that we've got to figure out how do we fit it within our current structure.
This is Christina Gentry. Board, if you recall, the SAB, as we talked about, or just right now, but the SAB application came to AHAB with the request for, I think, $300,000. And also with that application, it was incomplete in some of its requests to add info, and it had a 2021 pending lawsuit and litigation that they were still running through. And then when I probed further into the info, we asked for more info as to what that litigation was, and also asking for more equity inclusion pieces to that. I recall receiving, as you all did, like 471 pages that gave information of additional info, while most of that auxiliary included like tenants and homeowners, Independence Inc. giving us more info, and public support documents that came from New Horizons. The contextual for that information began at SAB at page 289 and ended at 301. And I was reading into that because I was really concerned or wanted to know more about the litigation piece. And in that piece, excuse me, they talked about making 20 affordable units be proposed, made affordable to qualifying households, and the households would include both renters and homeowners. So the project itself was conceptual in its process, and it required building permits and platting at that time. So I would, really want to know more about that 2021, because there were 3 counts that were still pending. One was negligence, count 2 was nuisance, and count 3 was trespass to land by water. And so I wanted to know, if that was still something that was pending, because as I'm reading on, I read into some of the lengthy documents, which include appendixes and construction calculations, and I'm not really verbiage, really consulting. I had to look up some of those things. But the conclusion was there's no significant concerns, but there was needing to be a retaining wall to confirm worsen detention basin. It would just seem to me to be a construction that was going to be environmentally not sound. I don't know if there is still something going on that they've created those pending walls. So I would want to know if there was the city approved requirements and approved any permits since then, and if they have been talked to by Garber and the other people involved in that litigation after 2021, and if there's some updates on that, because those are my concerns of placing something that was already in a situation that problematic for some of the residents there. There being a litigation, that seems to me to be a little problematic. But what has been done so far and what has been moved so far, so that we can understand more about that litigation.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. We don't have any updates, although those are great questions, Christina, but we don't have any updates. And I'd say the main reason is because this isn't a formal application, right? He's just submitting an out-of-cycle letter of request. And so based on that, we don't have the same information that we get out of an application regarding, what litigation might be going on or what permitting has happened. Really, all we have to work off, or what the board has to consider, is the letter at this point.
So that would be my concern about even supporting a letter. And Monty gave some great recommendations of what we can do. But those are my concerns reading back into the SAB application. Because I did give it a good once over again to make those considerations, to really do some real deep diving into what consideration would look like for recommendations from my perspective.
Do we have great clarity in the community about what applications, is it only through the NOFO? Do we also accept other things? I mean, is that known? Because I don't want to waste people's time coming forward for an out of cycle if that's not something we considered at all. But I don't know what the history is, and I'm not sure that I've seen that in writing in terms of how we communicate to the public when we accept applications and when we don't.
Good question.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. I guess a couple things. We do have a policy regarding when out-of-cycle applications will be accepted. And it's a very vague and broad policy, but it's one that to date the commission has been happy with. And I can look for that and pull that up. But with that, we have had continued conversations with Mr. Saul, Monty and I, and some others that are on the board. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we've probably had a half dozen to a dozen conversations with them. And I did explain to him that this is an out-of-cycle request. And based on discussions with the chair, it was decided to go ahead and have the board at least discuss it, even though it was communicated to Mr. Saul that it was an out-of-cycle request, that the board didn't have the authority to allocate or recommend allocation for CIP funds at this time. And I apologize, Mr. Chair. I just want to note that Ms. Zimmerman and Mr. Santee have had their hand up.
Yeah, Trent's got his. We're going to let Trent talk, and then who else?
Trent Santee, Lawrence Home Trip. I just want to clarify that this is a request for the CIP recommendation funding, which is again different than the regular funding, which we saw the process didn't really work out for a private developer in that process, and we've kind of made comments that we're working towards bettering that process. I think personally that the CIP funding would be a very quick way to do that. And I think that's part of how this even got started, is that when we found out we do have CIP funding, we made that available to people. The process didn't play out quick enough for him to take advantage of it, it sounds like. But he's asking for money for a street that's next to his property. It's not actually on his property. So this is in my mind, a very simple and quick way that say we did have the funding available now to help private developers overcome some of these obscure developing costs that happen on infill development. Just to clarify, this street is next to his property. It's not actually on his property. So the city's asking him to put that street in. He asked the city to put it in, and now we're here. But I just feel like this is a very happy medium on that, on how we can encourage private developers and help infill development and other things that we're trying to achieve. And I'd also want to just clarify that by him donating those other lots to offset that cost, it doesn't directly reimburse the city or the CIP fund for that, but it obviously gives lot stock to those non-for-profits, which I think we would all agree upon is a good thing. But I just want to clarify a side effect of that is it's going to raise his lot cost approximately $10,600 for each lot. And that's going to make his ability to make affordable market rate housing more difficult. And so we're competing with the market for this stuff. And I just want to clarify that because I've heard people make comments before in the past about new construction is too expensive and they're not supporting new construction because it's servicing 400,000 plus, 300, 400, 500,000 plus homes. But we're contributing to some of those costs. And in this case, it would be $10,600 a unit, which is significant. And so I just want people to kind of understand that when we give here and we take there, that the market has to absorb that cost. And we can't punish builders and developers for only hitting certain price points.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think, Edith, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question, and I probably missed this. Have we been clear that CIP funds are the same cycle as NOFO? Are CIP funds in the same cycle? Has that been made real clear? Well,
No.
so when we talk about out of cycle, is it clear that they're in the same cycle?
So they're not, there's a CIP process that runs every year that the city runs. We have nothing to do with it. Other than if we had a project like this, we could endorse the project. Is essentially what I understand, and I could be not understanding correctly. So, and then our NOFO process is separate from that. So what I was saying is he could apply for both. He would never get both, but he could apply through both processes if he chose to.
Yes, the CIP process will start, actually it's ongoing right now. It's about ready to kind of go through its formal review here very soon with the City Commission. And as part of its process, members of the public can submit CIP projects for consideration that were scored and can be taken up and looked at as a review on that one. So anybody can submit a project to the CIP for review and scoring. But what it does is it takes all the programs that are asked for and scores them out. So, it goes in with the same things as other large purchases, fire trucks, water towers, probably something else I'm forgetting. So they are not in sync with the NOFO process typically.
There's a chance up there.
Wasn't there a certain amount of CIP funding that AHAB is allowed to allocate?
I don't think we get to allocate that. I think we can, it was kind of earmarked, if you will, and they said we can make recommendations for projects that would impact affordable housing, is the way I understood it. But we don't actually control any of those CIP dollars.
Yes, typically. And there's also some very stipulations around how the CIP dollars can be spent because it has to be based upon what was put into the CIP. So if you said you were going to spend it for widgets, you have to spend it for widgets. You can't just then spend it on jelly beans. We're getting into lunch, so I'm going to food here. Sorry.
So this kind of fits into that because the work he wants done, which is a city infrastructure, falls into what you would classically call CIP dollars. Whereas if someone was building an apartment complex and building a vertical asset, that would not be an applicable CIP project necessarily.
Correct. Typically, CIP projects are projects that would be owned or operated by the city or something that we would have for in perpetuity, like a street or a sewer pipe or something like that.
But so just to clarify, we can't actually award him anything for his letter, but we could endorse him in his request for the CIP funds.
Essentially. I think Erica's been waiting. You're good? Okay. I just want to make sure we didn't miss you.
So I have a question, which is, if he makes a conventional NOFO, but it's not his property, that's what I was given to understand, that it is not his property. Can we grant him funds for something that is to be built on property that doesn't own?
The city would probably own that because it's in a city right of way.
Understood.
So what we get in exchange are the lots in that development. That's what you get back.
So from the NOFO, can funds be dispersed not to the person making the application, but instead to the city? Because the person making the application, I mean, I think it has to go through CIP as opposed to going through NOFO.
There are.
Well, in this work, Yeah, but if he came through NOFO, essentially he's requesting money for those lots. So it would almost be like he's requesting that the AHAB buys these lots from him for habitat and tenants to homeowners, because it would essentially it'd just be in a semantics at that point.
Well, except that without having the improvement done, right, without having the infrastructure there, then and perhaps the city would say we'll make this exchange here. But I think it has to go through CIP.
The one thing I'll note, just because I know we're running really short on time and you all have a lot of agenda there, is that developers will typically have to provide what's called public improvement plans. So how are those streets and sewers and water lines being built to a city standard? The city won't take them over until those projects are built and then inspected by us to ensure they meet the city standard. And then at that point, we will take them over. So
the city isn't building it. The developer is going to build it and then dedicate it to the city.
Correct.
So it would still go through him.
Okay.
There's a little nuance in there that's hiding.
All right.
When I look through our scoring matrix and things like, do you control the property, how many units does this, directly fund? CIP projects or infrastructure projects don't fit in our NOFO very well. I think this is a project I'd like to have us talking about, but I don't want to talk about any project outside of what is the process that's available to everybody, in this case for CIP. And I do not have a solid understanding of what the process is that AHAB has for CIP projects. If it's just a question of endorsing a project to the city commission for their regular CIP process that anybody can ask, and we have one looks like a decent project that has asked, I don't see why we wouldn't say, yes, this forwards the goals of affordable housing, unless this was not a process available to others and it's only been available to somebody. I'm just confused what the process is, and if I'm confused, others probably are too, which is probably slowing down people asking us for help.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. To add some clarity, hopefully, just a reminder that there's city CIP funds, which Jeff explained, any member of the public can put in an application that goes out to the whole community for a CIP project. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board, so I submitted a CIP application on behalf of the AHAB that was awarded funds for 2024 and 2025. I believe it was at the April AHAB meeting. Sorry, let me back up. The allocations were $380,000 in 2024 and $120,000 in 2025 for a total of $500,000 that the AHAB had the authority to provide recommendations on for a CIP project supporting affordable housing. I believe it was the April AHAB meeting. The AHAB moved to combine all of the AHAB CIP funds to 2025. So, and that the AHAB would determine the process for an open, transparent, and equitable application project for CIP projects to be awarded in 2025. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. The reason that it's not entirely clear is that the AHAB still needs to determine what that process is, and we have about a year to work through that. And in fact, I believe CIP AHAB project is going to be on the next agenda or the one after to discuss.
Nicholas Ward of Tenants to Homeowners. So really we've been having this conversation for a year and a half about the SOLB development. This would be an application then, the way that things currently stand, if it's going through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, that this could be made as a formal application in 24 to be awarded in 25 right now. Or it could be presented as a regular CIP budget item, but that still would then, if awarded, would not be awarded until 24 then, if it's going through CIP either way. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I don't know everything I need to know about this project, but I know enough to know that I think it's something I would like to see again in an application under our authority, and I'd also like to endorse his help in making a CIP application and letting that process run its course as well. So I'd like to see this again.
All right. So I think to try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes, are we in agreement that there's some interest in the project and that we'd like to see it in a formal application, whether that's the CIP application or the NOFO? That'd be up to the applicant to choose. Or both. Is that a fair summary of our conversation?
I would say there's another element, which is that one of the members of our board, and I would not disagree, would like clarification on the legal issues, on the litigation, on the...
I want to make a comment about that. Basically, this board's doing title work. I'm confused here. I know a little bit about that neighbor, and I have a personal opinion about all that, and that's a fight between property owners, and I don't want to settle those. So
I don't think we're trying to settle them. I think we're just trying to gain information for, because it was a sticking point within the application.
And they could probably address that in the next application. Yeah. Or we can make them certainly aware that that's a concern, that they should address it. Up to them whether they do it.
Was there also the option of endorsing, as a body, endorsing this CIP request if it goes to the city, through the city's CIP process? Because that seems like something that if AHAB has kind of courted this idea for a year and a half, it seems like there is enough interest in putting our weight behind that for the city. Everything else is a long ways down the line, and we need units now. And this is the possibility of bringing in, five for the housing, 5 lots for the Housing Trust Fund, as well as 51 units of supply.
Yeah.
And when the CIP does go forward, it does go forward with public comment and letters attached to it, so that would not be an uncommon item.
Yeah. So next month at our meeting, we'll talk about how we want to carry out our CIP process and recommendations.
And we have time before the city CIP process? Meet again and set on a letter?
No. This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Jeff, it looks to me like the CIP applications are closed for consideration of the 24 budget. Is that incorrect? Are they still accepting applications?
It may be. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. So.
This is Leah, sorry, and just one other note is that the AHAB did send this to the City Commission when it was originally, when SALB originally applied through the regular NOFO process. The AHAB decided not to fund through the trust fund awards, but did make a recommendation to the City Commission that it was funded through either general operating funds or CIP funds, and at that time the Commission declined, but
in fact, this is probably the impetus for us getting the CIP dollars, allocated to this board to make recommendations on at that time. So, okay.
Real quick, Nicholas Ward, Tennis Homeowners. Just going to say, also, with what Christina's bringing up and what's been mentioned, I think it is important. The city's in litigation all the time, right? And we're doing things, but it's important to know just what the nature of it is. Not that everything needs to be detailed out, but just it's a flag that just what's the deal. And then I think hopefully more things come to us like this. There's lots that we're not running out of infill necessarily. There's little one-off lots all over the place, but there's going to be big pockets of land that need a road to them. And we're going to need a way to do that. And if it's on the developer fully to put in that public infrastructure, we're going to be seeing housing prices of $500,000-$600,000. And if we want to get it down, we're going to have to commit to some of that infrastructure, even though it's kind of a roundabout way. And this might be one of those conversations, again, if you take it back to the formation and structure of boards, where it's good to know the whole picture instead of saying, oh, this person plans to give us 5 houses at market rate lot costs, so they're just selling us lots, is that you might not prioritize that, but when you see that it's putting in needed infrastructure that could potentially connect other things at some point, and that it's bringing those other 51 units that we need for market rate housing, that factors in a little bit in a way that might not factor in if you didn't have the whole picture there.
All right.
This is Leah Rosen, Affordable Housing Administrator. I apologize for interjecting, but I just wanted to note that the deadline for submitting 2024 CIP requests was March 2023. So we have missed a deadline for 2024, but could work with SOLM on a 2025 application, either through the AHAB or through the city.
All right, so we will talk about this more. I don't think we're doing anything at this point. It's 1 o'clock. We have quick updates. Is there anything there, Leah, that we need to get quick update on before we go?
This is Leah Rosen, Affordable Housing Administrator. We do have one quick update from Ms. Guffey.
Okay.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Edith Guffey, member at large, until the end of this meeting. I do want to announce that this is my last meeting. I have turned my resignation into Mayor Larson. I told her in May. I am not angry or anything like that. I just know that your important meeting in November, where you will be awarding trust fund grants, I will be out of the country. And you know how important that meeting is. And I felt it was wise for me to resign now so that the mayor could have the opportunity to appoint someone new to fill this at-large position, and that they could be well integrated into the meeting by then and fully participate in that meeting. I understand that with my resignation, I am other than Christina, there will be one person of color left on this board. And I hope that the mayor, I'm sure she understands the importance of a diverse board, and that she will take the opportunity to fill this seat with another person of color. I've enjoyed working with you all. I have learned a tremendous amount, and know that I will still be cheering you on from Australia, where I will be in November. Thank you so much for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Edith. You'll be greatly missed. And yeah, and specifically, thank you for co-chairing for a couple of years. And I've really enjoyed our time together during that. So, okay, with that, we can be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Edith. We'll miss you.
Thank you, Edith.